Howdy, folks. I'm Brawny Boron, brusquely brushing bickering blackbirds.
I'm Amber.
And here are more bickering blackbirds for us to brush. Amber, I have a question here. I have a question. Why are we brushing blackbirds?
Well, see, before, when I was doing the food thing, you kind of were like, why are we doing all this food launching? And so I was like, okay, no more food launching. So, now we're brushing blackbirds.
You do know that blackbirds were used in a pie, and when the pie was opened, the birds began to sing, and they flew out and stuff like that. So in a lot of ways, you're still just flinging food,
but you're getting
doing
eaten.
It with more steps.
They're not getting eaten.
Well, the other food that got flung didn't get eaten either. So, I think that you're still on a food trend.
Blackbirds aren't food.
Well, certainly the pie song would have a different take on that. Let's get started. Amber's like, no.
You told me that they were just there for decoration.
They were. It's all decoration. All right, folks, our first letter is titled, Am I a Jerk for Being Upset That My Boyfriend Lied to Me About Being Rich? My boyfriend and I just had our 1-year anniversary, and as his present for me, he was telling me that he lied to me for a whole year and that he's actually pretty wealthy. Originally, he told me that he was working as a financial assistant at a small accounting firm and his job was to collect and prepare documents for the accountants. He complained about the pay and said that he was thinking about going back to school and becoming an accountant himself, but he probably won't be able to afford it. He told me that the flat he lived in was his grandparents' and they rented it to him for cheap, and that he made sure to emphasize that he would never be able to afford a flat like that or any flat without roommates. He asked to borrow money from me a few times and sometimes asked me to pay for him too when we went out. Turns out that he comes from a pretty wealthy family, he has a master's degree, and he is the head of finance at a family friend's well-going company. He went to multiple business trips since we started dating, but told me that he was visiting his parents, friends, and was sick each time. He went into such made-up detail about his life, he even made up fake stories about what happened at work. On our anniversary, he finally told me the truth. He said that I had proven myself and acted like he is handing me a winning lottery ticket. He really expected me to be happy, but I just kept asking him about his lies, and I'm still very upset. I have no idea who this person actually is. He lied to me for a whole year about nearly everything, but he acts like I passed the test, and I'm the happy winner of his trust. Well, he finally trusts me, but I sure as heck don't trust him anymore. I'm certain that this relationship is over, but I don't like to make big decisions when I'm this angry, and I always try to imagine myself in the other person's place, but I'm just having a really hard time here. Sure, he might have been burnt in the past, but to wait a whole year and lie to me about everything during that time? Am I wrong to be this upset for not being able to see this from his perspective? Alright folks, what do you think? Jerk or not the jerk?
Not the jerk. You're absolutely right. You do not know this man, except he's a great liar. That's pretty much at this point the only thing you can trust about him.
Yeah.
When someone lies to you this much and this convincingly, it makes it really hard to trust them ever again. So even if he were to tell the truth from this point forward, how would you know that's the truth?
Yeah, I think that's really the problem here is how would OP know what's happening, whether or not they can trust this person, because it really doesn't seem like you can trust him at this point in time. And he just kind of went all in on all these lies, made up stories and stuff like that.
Right, it wasn't even a little white lie here or there. It was these elaborate, things about his day and everything.
Yeah. I could have understood if he had taken some time and just kind of lived poor and not explicitly told OP his financial situation and just had, rented out an apartment, had, clothing that kind of matched a lower income and all those kinds of things, then that might have been a little bit of a different situation and just never gone into details about his finances, or maybe even, not gotten to any details about his work, because how is she going to know any difference if he has to take a business trip or something?
Yeah, lots of jobs have business trips, and he could have just been like, oh, well, I don't feel I don't feel comfortable talking about finances at this stage in our relationship. A lot of people have boundaries about discussing their finances.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, there are so many ways he could have handled it that weren't like that level of manipulation. And so I just don't see this as a salvageable relationship because the trust is gone.
Yeah. You know, what the boyfriend could have done, and here's some bad Brian's advice, is he could have just said he won the lottery. And then he could just pretend that he won the lottery and it came into all this money.
Yeah, this is bad advice. Do not take this advice.
I'm just kidding. It would be terrible.
It would be, especially if the truth comes out down the line.
It would eventually come out. I'm just being very silly here. But let me know what you folks think.
Well, I'm also worried too, sorry to interrupt,
continue.
about how he seems to think that he's hot stuff and Opie should be like worshipping the ground he walks on now that she knows she's been let into his life. Like, I feel like maybe he has an ego problem too, and that might not bode well for their relationship.
Yeah, well, and not to mention, like, is he going to test her on other things?
Mm-hmm.
Like, to what extent is this going to take place?
Right, even if she's earned his trust in this one way, what if he stops trusting her in something else, or, you know?
Or feels like he has to test her on something, right? And how is this going to be for their future relationship? How is that going to, you know, she's not going to be able to trust him. He says that he trusts her now, but to what extent, right? But let me know what you folks think. So anyhow, take care and good luck. And Liana Van says, you proved yourself to him more like he proved who he is to you. And Boeing 36780 says, woohoo, you get to be with a rich guy. Sarcasm. And Potato Fiend 7 says, Willy Wonka complex for sure. And Ree Tower says, not the jerk. You mentioned the level of detail that he added to his lies, including not just fabricating broad strokes, but also day-to-day experiences. That's pathological. Now, imagine what it'll be like when he has something that he has a real reason to lie about, rather than something that could have possibly been dismissed by, I don't want to talk about that. And as for it being a test, well, expect to be tested on every single junction of your relationship from now on. Have a friend he doesn't like? Expect to be tested on whether you would pick him over anyone else. Maybe he suspects you of cheating. You're going to have to pass his test on where you were and who you're with and why. Have a disagreement on whether you want to have children? Well, you can guess what kind of test that will be. I mean, sure, you could bet that the man you know nothing about, other than he's happy to lie to your face, is not going to keep lying to your face. But on the other hand, when someone reveals who they are, believe them. I mean, I could also point out that you mentioned very little about his personality. Like, is he a generous tipper? Have you actually met any of his friends? What kind of people does he associate with? And that money that he borrowed, how much was it? And is he actually going to pay it back? But even so, keep in mind that any and all of that could be carefully curated as a part of this cultivated set of lies that he's been telling you. Alright folks, our next letter is titled, Am I a jerk for devastating my wife over my son's nude calendar? Repost, apparently I didn't respond to the judgment bot in time. So, I'm a 45-year-old male, and my son Cole is a freshman in college, he's an athlete, and he's getting a jump start on training. Apparently, there is a British college rowing team that puts out a beefcake nude calendar of their team as a fundraiser. Apparently, it has become quite a thing and is relatively famous. I guess the boys got together and decided to do the same thing. High quality printing and absolute A+ photography, and came up with a really slick product. It is selling well on campus. At this point, it's going to be pretty much on every girl's dorm wall. And some guys' walls too, lol. They've made decent money to help fund the team, but most donated to a children's cancer charity. It's pretty amazing. We didn't know anything about this until Cole came home and proudly presented us with a copy. His month is May. It did not go well. His mother almost had a stroke, wailing, hyperventilating, weeping. Apparently, she is too mortified for words. And to comprehend a bunch of college girls that are going to have a picture of her baby in the buff on their walls for a month. And what will her friends think? I think that is ridiculous. A calendar of naked guys is nothing to get worked up over. They're all technically adults, and I'm proud of the boys' ingenuity and confidence. I'm sure it took some guts to do that. And give the money to charity. Amazing. I told my wife that she should lighten up. That if I looked as good as he did at that age, and had been as handsome and tan and fit, I would have done the same thing too. The calendar is not X-rated, and is not adult entertainment. Okay, it is pretty racy, and definitely pushing the limits, but no one's business is really exposed thanks to judicious poses and props and such, although they are definitely pushing that exposure to the absolute max. I have to admit, if anything was shifted the tiniest bit, you would be able to tell the boy's religion, so to speak, but they kept it all legal enough. And then, they obviously wanted to sell. Fine, who cares? His mom, though, is insisting that I do something about it. What am I supposed to do? What's done is done. Stop them? You can't stop what's already finished. Get them back? Seriously? You know that's impossible, right? Punish him for what and how? Cue more hysterics. And now she's not even speaking with me for not supporting her, and ashamed to show her face to her friends who I'm sure couldn't care less about some college boy's picture from 600 miles away. And, for what it's worth, Cole's girlfriend is totally on board with it. My wife called me a jerk, but not in those words, for not taking her side. So am I the jerk? Perhaps I'm the jerk for not seeing things from my wife's point of view and not sympathizing with her, but I don't think that I am. Judgment facts. I might be the jerk because 1, I didn't take into account my wife's distress and was dismissive of her, and 2, a good husband should be more attuned to her feelings. Alright folks, what do you think? Jerk or not the jerk?
Not the jerk. I think the most important thing in the moment was to make sure that your son knew you were supporting him and to try and end that conversation, because the worst thing to happen would be for the son to start feeling upset and guilty about this now that the calendar's already out there. I do think that you probably could have handled the situation with the wife a little better. I mean, asking people to lighten up never goes well. It does feel dismissive.
Yeah.
So, like, it might be good to try having another conversation with her when she's ready. And you could even apologize for the lighten up remark.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly think that could have been handled a little bit better. Maybe you could have pulled her aside and said, come on, honey, let's go talk about this for a minute. And that way the son isn't getting exposed to, this type of stuff. And then they could have had a conversation and discussed it, and he could have listened to her and let her decompress for a minute.
Because, I mean, it's very clear there's nothing you can do about it at this point in time. So she may just have needed to vent and felt like she didn't have someone she could vent to. And what she is saying is completely, ridiculous in my opinion. So I understand why you didn't want to just be the sounding board for that. But moving forward, it may be helpful to have a conversation where you let her vent those feelings and try not to interrupt her, or to have this conversation with a third-party mediator who can kind of keep the flow and make sure that she feels like she's being heard.
Yeah, I mean, you could have been like, at least it's not a statue of David. That was on display for millennia, for all kinds of people to take pictures of for all time. That's kind of funny, like art like that sticks around for ages, where you have, people's figures like on display for people. And it transcends, generations in time and whatnot. And no one feels embarrassed about that, right? And I think that that's, in a lot of ways, like art. There's certainly something, beautiful about the human form. And certainly that's really a thing that is a personal decision about whether or not you want to have that out there or not. And it sounds also like this wasn't full frontal nudity or anything. This was, again, carefully crafted in such a way that it was tasteful, I guess. But let me know what you folks think. So anyhow, take care and good luck. And Jay the Kiss 09 says, wait till she finds out he's had adult intimate time. And OP replies, I think she learned that a year or two ago, but is in denial. It's certainly never mentioned. It sounds like she just does not like any of that aspect or think about any of that, and I can't blame her. Like, who wants to think about their children in that way? And Hippo Streak Enjoyer says, you really made it seem like the adult parts were sticking out in the first part, for goodness sake. And OP replies, sorry, I didn't mean to confuse. Nothing was visible in that respect. And it looks like OP has some kind of update here. Thanks to everyone for all their support. Cole is really a great kid. His mother is not crazy or psycho. She's just concerned she's a good mother. Someone did just DM me, though, and suggested that the pictures were probably more salacious than I was letting on. They're really not, honestly. Yes, the boys are all naked, but no one is really showing the goods, and the thing is that it's actually pretty tame in the grand scheme of things. The target audience is obviously just college girls. I think that most of you could say that they are a bit naughty. I will admit that the boys have been pushing it, and in most of the pictures, whatever is hampering the view is indeed the bare minimum of what it has to be, which they are obviously have done on purpose. But they are young and not so subtle yet. Everyone is at least a good 95 to 100% covered, or at least obscured. In Cole's case, he's outdoors in a stream, and there's a plant in the foreground, and a piece of a leaf is obscuring pretty much everything that it needs to or close to it. No one is getting an eyeful. They're a bunch of great guys. No adult entertainment. All right, folks, it is tea time. Grab your beverages of choice. I've got some tea right here, and Amber, she's got a joke.
Why didn't the orange win the race?
Well, I can tell you exactly why the orange didn't win the race, because Amber came along and flung the orange and was like, hey, orange, I see you're racing, let's throw you.
No.
Because we're gonna do, I'm an orange orangutan, orangeing oranges, oranging.
I wouldn't do that to the orange.
Of course not. Help the orange.
Now I feel like I can't write these for you anymore.
I'm kidding. I'm teasing.
It ran out of juice.
It ran out of juice. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I'm sorry. And I have licorice spice. All right, folks, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for watching. Happy Wednesday. I can't believe it's Wednesday already. Amber, we need some kind of moral advice and or guidance, and please have it a surprising present that's really not a present.
Surprise! I'm dumping you because you lied to me for an entire year.
That would be quite the surprise. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you all tomorrow.
Bye.